Alright, hello everybody. I'm just here to basically record a little session demonstrating how to set up some menu toggles of different types, both Boolean and integer, and I'll go over those in more detail by what I mean by that when I get in here, but basically this is going to be a little tutorial on how to update a VRChat avatar in Unity. This is for SDK version 3 on Unity 2019. That's important to note because pretty soon VRChat's going to be upgrading to Unity Editor 2021, which is going to be a really different experience. They'll probably have a whole new SDK with that, and so this tutorial may not be relevant anymore after they've made that change. So I just want to put that out there, that this is for a specific version of Unity, for a specific point in time for VRChat. For a lot of you, you've probably looked up videos on how to do X or Y with VRChat in Unity in the past, and noticed a lot of the videos are outdated, so I'm just getting that little bit of custodial work out of the way first so that you know what this video is targeting as far as version here. You can see on my screen I've already got my Unity up and running, so I've got my project loaded and Virality is coming up here pretty soon, so I wanted to get my Virality badges on my main avatar that I'm going to use for that event and get my toggles set up so that I can turn the bracelet and the badge on and off. In addition, I've been playing with different hair on my avatar, and I want to be able to easily cycle through the different hairstyles, including none, which is what we see right now. So I'm going to also demonstrate how to set that up here in Unity. So I guess off the top, I've already started setting some things up, so I'm going to go over that first. It's often useful to set up your structure first and then start doing your animations and attaching them to your structure after you've already done that. So with that in mind, one thing you need to be aware of is that when you want to start animating stuff, get your assets out onto the avatar in advance. So for instance, I've already got my hair pieces placed on here. Some of them are terrible, but I want them as options there. So as you can see, I've got these all disabled right now because I want to make my default state the base state that I'm going to animate from. So I'm starting with the default state, and while I'm at it and thinking about that, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my bracelets because my badges, because I don't want those to be on by default. So I've gone up here to the little checkbox. When you click on a game object, this checkbox is the is enabled state. I know it doesn't have a title next to it. It's just next to the name here. But when you're adding animations, this is going to be called the is enabled or is active, I believe, state. So we'll see that when we actually go into the animation panel and animate these on as well. So I'm going to go ahead and turn those off for now because we don't want them there in the default state. So with my assets already added to the correct place on my avatar, already placed correctly where I want them to be, already scaled, already rotated, they're ready to go. I just want to be able to turn them on and off. The first thing you're going to need to do in your project is find where your menus and animations live. Now, different avatar creators structure where these things are located differently. In the case of this avatar that I'm using for the demonstration, this is Bento's bear avatar. that I'm using and customizing for myself. I've already taken it through Substance Painter and did some custom coloring, added my goatee, and this guy's ready to go as far as that goes. So that would be a demo for another day. But basically, I'm ready to go here with menus. And so the first thing, if your Unity layout doesn't look exactly like this, don't worry. All Unity editors of this version are going to have the same panels. They just may not be displayed. They may be in different positions. I do like to keep it pretty close to default, so this is pretty similar to what you're going to see in a default layout, where I've got my hierarchy in the top left, I've got my preview window in the center, I've got my inspector on the right. In addition, I also have my animator over here on the right. I put some of my tools over here on the right, like Pumpkin Tools and the VRChat SDK. So that's all over here. And then in the bottom left is where I put my project, my animation, and my console. By default, your project and console should be here. Animation, if you want to open and close that, that's Control 6, I believe. Actually, that won't close it, but it will open it if it's not already there. So otherwise, you can go into, I believe, Window or maybe View, and there's a way to open it there as well. So if you go to Animation, Control and 6 will open that window. It may not appear where where I have it placed when you first open it. If you want to move the placement of any of your panels in Unity Editor, you can just click and drag that panel anywhere you want. So if I want to put this over here, I can. The reason I don't have my animator or animation window in the same place as my animator panel is because I flip back and forth between these a lot if I do have them in the same place, but by putting them in separate panels, I can have them both open at the same time to make it a little bit easier to work with. So I'm going to go back to my project view here, and the first thing you want to do is identify where your animations and your animation controller, which is this icon here with the two boxes and the lines connecting them. Those lines indicate basically the animation state management, which I'll get into a little bit more here. You may or may not have your animations mixed in with where your menus are. For instance, on this avatar, by default, the creator put those in separate folders. You can do that if you want. It's not necessary. The new animations that I've been adding, I just put right here where the menus are because it's a little bit easier for me to manage. Really, even if there were 50 animations in here, it wouldn't bother me. I know where to find everything, but it's up to you how clean you want to keep your projects. So with that in mind, if I click on this animation controller, the creator called it face gestures, but what this really is an FX controller, and it can do all kinds of different things. But you notice when I click on it, the inspector window is blank because we don't work with animation controllers from the inspector window. Instead, those are in the animator window. So the animator window is basically animator state management, and I'll go over a little bit more of that in detail here. So you have two tabs at the top, layers and parameters. Parameters you can think of as the data behind the animations that provides stateful information about where the animation should be or which animation should be running. That's important because you're going to create conditions that will change animation state based on what a parameter's current value is. We'll get into that in more detail, but just keep in mind that if you want to store the state of your avatar, this is where you do it. You're going to add parameters. So I've already gone ahead and created a hair parameter. This is going to be an integer value. Integer is basically 0 to 35,000. It lets you store an integer value. Integer meaning there's no decimal places. So it's going to be a whole number, 0 to 35,000. And that lets you do a bunch of different things. The reason I'm using an integer for my hair is I have like, I think, 4 different hair pieces, no, 5 different hair pieces that I want to cycle through, and then a 6th one that's default, which is no hair. And I'll get into that in more detail when I get to making my hair menu and hooking that all up. The next thing is I've got a couple of Boolean values for my virality badge and bracelet. Boolean is just on or off. That's what Boolean means. It can only be true or false. So there's no extra funkiness with that. In a second, I'll go over a little bit more about bits and how many bits each of these fields take up. That's important because VRChat only gives you 256 bits to play with per animation controller. So you are limited in how much you can add, but I can tell you as a rough guideline, Boolean is the smallest, it only uses 1 bit. Then you're going to get to integers, and then you're going to get to floating points. I think there might be some other types in here too. If we go in, yeah, we can see trigger as well. I've never used trigger. I don't know exactly what that's for. So I won't be talking about that, and I won't be going over floats in this demonstration either, because all I'm setting up is int and bool toggles in here. So with that in mind, like I said, I've already set up my hair, my badge, and my bracelet with the value types that they're going to be using. And so this makes them now available to the layers view, which basically these are your animation control states. And you're generally going to have one of these for each different kind of set of animations that you're managing all together or against each other. So I've got one for my hair that I'm going to use. I've got one for my badge, and I've got one for my bracelet. Now when you create these, and I'll just create a new one to show you, we'll just leave it called new layer. Normally you would put a name in here. In fact, it's best practice to name this the same as the parameter. You don't have to, but it makes it easier for you to track and keep it in mind if you use the same name. Anyway, I'm just going to use new layer, and you'll notice that the bar is gray underneath, whereas these other ones are lighter gray. So what you need to do to make this animator take effect is drag your weight up to 1. It's a little hard to explain what the weighting system is all about. If you're doing animations where, for instance, if this animation shouldn't be able to be interrupted by that animation, you would change the weight so that the animation you don't want to get interrupted has a higher weight than one with a lower weight. In VRC, we're not really concerned about that, so we just set the weight to 1. But one thing to keep in mind is if the weight is set to 0, the animation will not run at all. So you do need to make this at least something greater than 0, and for the purposes of VRC, just drag it up to 1. Just drag it up to 1 and be done with that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And I just noticed that on my bracelet, I hadn't set my weight to 1. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So that's now all set up. Pretty straightforward for now. We're going to come back to this and hook up animations after we create them. But this is the structure that we needed to get started. Now, if you want these parameters to save with your avatar so that when you change worlds or you change it out and back into your avatar, it remembers what the state was, that's where we're going to need to go to the parameters, which is a separate thing. Remember, we were looking at face gestures. Now I'm going to go over to parameters. This is a specific game object type to VRC. and this one you use the inspector window for. So you'll notice that even though I clicked on this other game object, I'm still showing the animator for the gesture menu that, or sorry, the animation controller that I was just looking at. That's because the animator panel will always just show the last animation controller you were working with, even if you changed game object. This is only tracking an animation controller. So you will need to click on your parameter object and then click to your inspector tab to see that. So you'll see that this looks an awful lot like what's in the animator under the parameters. Again, it's best practice and may even be required by Unity to, in fact, I'm quite certain Unity requires that it be the same name. So you'll see I've added my hair, my badge, and my bracelet. You're going to see the same thing here that I've added. I've checked the saved checkbox, which means whenever this state updates, it's going to save that to my avatar so that if I flip out of that avatar and back into it, it will remember that state and put my avatar back into it when it gets reloaded. This is really important for a few reasons. An example of where you don't want to save a state, potentially, let's say you have a not safe for work avatar and you want to make it always revert back to a safe or clothed state. You might not want to save the state of your clothing toggle being off, or your not safe for work mode toggle if you have one. You might want to revert that to a default state and not save it. So what you would do then is turn off the saved, make sure that the default value is set to the correct one for how you want that to rehydrate. Because this is a totally plain safe for work model, I don't really care about not saving state. I want my avatar to rehydrate with the state it was in where I last left it. So because of that, I've got save turned on for everything. And then my defaults are all sensible. I don't want my badges on by default, and I don't want a specific hair selected by default. But if I did, I could easily change this value from 0 to 1. Hang on, I got a little moderation I need to do here. And for some reason I can't moderate that. All right, let me get another view added to my, let's see, on here, and I'm going to go ahead and just chuck this guy here, and it won't let me. Alright, well, this is the problem of not having a mod on your channel, folks. I'm just going to clear chat. Okay, alright, for now moderators. Okay, cool. Yeah, I hate that when people interrupt your stream with spam advertisements. That's not very nice. Alright, anyway, so yeah, if I did have a default state that I wanted to put it in here, and I already know I am going to want a specific hair piece on, so I'm going to make 1 my default in this case, because I want 0 to identify that there's no hair on. But when I fall back, like I'm uploading this avatar new, it's going to revert everything to defaults. I want that first hair piece to come on, and I'll show you that more and why that's important and how this connects to that when we get to it. So I'm just going to save my project for the changes I've got going right now, because that's a really good practice. If you're not in the practice of saving often, Control S is your best friend. It can save you a lot of frustration because you can lose your state or get into weird states in Unity Editor if you hadn't saved and it crashes. And it does crash. So You may use it for weeks and it never crashes, and then all of a sudden it's crashing 3 times a day. So just to be safe, saved often, Control S, best friend, on you go. All right, so with my parameters set up, and again, to add a new parameter, just click the add button. It's going to copy the name of the previous one. Let's see, and then to delete it, oh, well, that's interesting. How do you delete, you might ask? And the answer is I couldn't tell you. Wow. Good job, Unity. Okay, there we go. Now the delete is highlighted. Okay, boom. So there's some funkiness with selecting these guys where you need to click into and then go to delete. All right. So fun with Unity. Some of these issues are a little bit cleaned up in newer versions of Unity. So when we do move to 2021, there will be some better UIs and interface to work with for Unity Editor. It's continually improved, and 2019 is a fairly old version now. It's about 4.5, I want to say 4.5 years old now. So it is what it is. Another thing to note in this view, when you're looking at your parameter, animation controller parameters object, is that down here at the bottom in the information sections, you can see we see our total memory. And that 100 out of 256 is how many bits we've used. Again, using an integer is going to use up 16 bits. Using a Boolean will only use 1 bit. And then using a float will use, I think, 32 bits. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's 32 bits when you use a float value. So there are costs associated with setting up parameters, and you'll want to check your total memory usage before adding new ones to make sure that you have enough bits available to do the things you want to do. Technically, I could save bits by doing my hair as Boolean toggles instead, but I'm not going to be able to save a significant amount of bits from doing that, and I have plenty available, so I'm just going to use integer because it's going to make things easier for me in this case. Lots of crazy things you can do with all of these values. All right, so that's expression parameters. We're set up there. Then the next thing to do is identify your root menu, what you're going to be working with. If you're not really familiar with your project, possibly one of the easiest ways to do that is to click on your root avatar game object, and then what we're looking for is the animation controllers, specifically for the FX controller. And so let's see, that's going to be right here for menu under expressions. And again, this will look different for different projects depending on how folks have rigged this up. So actually, yeah, you're going to look for playable layers, base, FX, and you can see here this face gestures. If I want to go straight to that guy, I can just click on the object, and it will highlight down here in the project panel where that is. Right? It's going to tell me the folder. Oops, I just clicked into it. That's not what I wanted. But anyway, it's going to tell you the folder and how to get there. Again, how to do that, come down to your playable layers, base, FX. That's usually in VRChat where your custom menu is going to be for your avatar. Yeah, so click that and it will show you where it is in the project view. Now I can click on that. Now I can go to Animator and see it. That's that, but I actually want to see the menu, and so to get to that, that's going to be down here in expressions menu, and then that's this top menu. Again, if you click it, it should show you or take you in the project view to where it's at. I'm already there, but what what's important is it's telling me it's named top menu. So I can look in my project over here folder and see this is top menu. So when you click on that, this is a VRC menu object, and it will actually say, if I go back here, it will tell me it's a VRC expression menu object. So that's what we're looking at here. This is used in the inspector window, is where you'll configure it. And basically, some things you might want to check: make sure it's set to the right avatar. Some avatar creators put multiple avatars in the default scene that you'll open, and so you want to make sure you're working on the right one. In this project, I just have the one avatar, so I've deleted. Actually, I haven't deleted them all. I have another one here. So just for reference, I kept one of the other ones for the polar bear config. It is there, but I've got it turned off. And so, yeah, you'll just want to make sure that you're actually working on the one for the correct avatar. So I'm on the right avatar here, and then you're going to see the control list. These are basically what you're going to see in the top level of the menu when you go into it. So this avatar is going to have an emotes menu, a body types menu, an expressions menu, and an extras menu. These are all submenus. These just basically connect other menus underneath these choices. And you can tell that by the type here being submenu. The name can be anything. You can have icons by providing a 2D texture on the icon field. I'll get to parameters when we actually get into setting up discrete actions in a submenu. But this is a high-level menu that's just got other submenus right now. So, and any submenus you want to see, you can see that the submenu is set here for all of these menu items that are in the top menu. And if you want to see where that's at, you can just, again, click the name. It will show you in your project view where that is. Okay, so all of these first three were provided by the avatar maker. The extras menu is a new one that I've created, and I've already started setting up. So that's right here. I'm going to go ahead and click on my extras menu, and I've already created the controls that I needed. So, but this is really easy to set up new ones. So I'll just go through a little example. If we're making a toggle, you might, you want to give it a name. We'll just call this one toggle something. You could add a texture. When you click this, you'll get your texture library pop up. If you're using Poyomi, it's going to come with a bunch of icons already. There might be something in here that already works for you. Anything that the avatar creator added is also going to be in here and available. But yeah, like if you wanted to just give it a heart, you can do that. You get a little icon preview in there when you've set that up. Types that are available: you have button, toggle, submenu, 2-axis, 4-axis, and radial puppet, and 1, 2, 4, and radial for puppets. I'm not going to be going over puppets in this demo. They're pretty straightforward to use, but for what I'm doing here, I'm only going to be using toggles. So button is basically to just do something once, like it just triggers something and then it's done. Toggle is to turn something on and keep it on until it's hit again, and then it's turned off, right? Puppets give you a radial control that you can do 0 to 100, or you can do different positional logic and have those affect different parameters. Again, I'm not going to get into those, but if you want to make a toggle, select toggle, and then you're going to select the parameter that's being toggled. So these should look familiar. These are all of the parameters that we set up inside of the expression parameter in this case, but inside of the VRC menu parameters object, game object that we created, so or that we updated in this case. So yeah, pick the one that makes sense for your toggle, and away you go. I'm going to go ahead and delete this one because we don't need it. And then you can see here, I already had a Panosphere decal, a rainbow decal. This is a new one for my badge and a new one for my bracelet. They are hooked up to the correct parameters already. And I've already given them names, made sure that they're set to toggle. They're all ready to go. So what I am going to do now is create a hair menu. So I'll show you how to create a new submenu that you can hook into things. So you're going to come up, right click in your project space in just some empty area. Go up to create at the top. This is a VRChat game object specific to the Avatar SDK. And then you're going to choose expressions menu. And it's going to give it a default name, which is just the name of the game object, which is VRC expressions menu. So click into that, empty it, and I'm going to call it hair menu because this is where I'm going to put all my hair controls. So when you click that, you're going to have all empty. There's no controls in here yet. So I'm going to start adding my controls. I know I want one for none, for no hair. It's going to be a toggle. I don't have any textures. I'm not going to put any textures in this. But what it's controlling is hair. And the value it's going to set is 0. Now you'll notice that it had already populated the value 1 in there. The reason for that is because 1 was the default. And so it's assuming that since this is the first control you're adding to a menu that's affecting hair, it's going to set it to 1, which is the default, right? That's not the case for me because I'm actually putting the no hair in here, which is going to be a value of 0. You can make these values whatever you want. It doesn't have to be that way. It's just that 0 for no hair makes sense. So that's what I'm doing. And that's also why my default is 1 and not 0, because I have a specific hair that I want to be my default. So I'm going to use 1 for that and made 1 my default in the parameter settings. So the next one, I believe the hair that I'm using for default is called bangs. So I'm going to put in a menu option for bangs, switch that to toggle. Parameter is going to be hair, and the value is 1. Again, it's going to pull in the default by default because you're creating a new reference to it. Next one is going to be, let's see, I'll put Mohawk in there as my next one. It's a toggle. We're going to set hair, and again it defaults to 1, but I'm going to set it to 2. I'm going to add another one for, let's see, what's it called here? Fade. Alright, we're going to make it a toggle. We're going to set it to hair. I'm going to make that value 3. And so all you want to do is make sure that these are all unique, distinct values. And there's a reason I'm doing this, which I'll be able to demonstrate later, but what this allows me to do is, because these are all toggles, if you toggle them off, it'll revert to the default state, which will be 1, which will automatically turn this bangs one back on. So this way it creates a bunch of toggleable controls that you can never get into a bad state using, because it will just revert back to the default state if you toggle off whatever is currently turned on right now. And the nice thing about that is it actively indicates in VRChat which one is active. So you'll see what I'm talking about when I go demonstrate that a little later, once this is all hooked up and working. So, alright, next thing I'm going to do is keep adding controls. I want my anime hair. That's going to be a toggle. And that's going to affect hair on number 4. And one more. And that one's going to be my, I'll call it parted. The name it has is hair curtain bangs, kind of nuts, so, and it doesn't make sense for what it's doing anyway. So anyway, hair in, and I'm going to give it a value of 5. So boom, that's my menu. These are all the controls I'm going to have. What I see in that control wheel when I get into this sub menu is none, bangs, mohawk, fade, anime, and parted. So that's it. That's all there is to it for setting up a menu. For the menu itself. Now, we have to get this menu into the top level menu so that we can access it. So all you need to do there is go to your top menu, do new control. I'm going to call this hair. I'm going to make it a submenu type. And then when I click the little circle at the right hand side here, it will let me just pick out of these. So I can click hair menu. Alternately, you could just drag and drop from your project panel into that field to set it as well. So one of the nice things about Unity is there's a lot of different ways to do things. They don't always all work the same though, so keep that in mind. Animations are particularly persnickety about that kind of stuff. So anyway, my hair menu should be hooked up and available in the top level menu for me to get into and affect at this point. So with that, I'm pretty much done with my menu infrastructure and having all of these toggles in place. The only thing I need to do now is actually start creating the animations for them. And then those are going to get dropped into the animation state stuff here. So we will get to that too. Let's see, these all zoom. Here we go. All right. Oh yeah, it does keep the zoom level across all of them. All right, anyway. So the first thing I need to do when I want to create a new animation, make sure my animation panel is open. And you'll notice that right now, like, all of this is grayed out. I can't interact with anything. The reason why is because sample scene is what's selected right now in the hierarchy, and you can't animate the scene. So the animation panel is going to basically be all grayed out because it doesn't know how to animate that. What you want to do is select your avatar, and now you'll notice that create button appears here, but everything else is still grayed out because we haven't selected anything. Now, there's a little bit of funkiness in Unity that it expects the default animation controller on an object to have the same name as the object. And if we look at project here, there is no animation controller called Duran. That's my root game object, right? So it's going to look for an animation controller here called Duran. There isn't one. Instead, it's called face gestures. And so Unity doesn't understand that disconnect, right? It's like, hey, where's the Duran animation controller? It's not here, so I don't know which one to use. And so what's convenient is when I hit create, it's going to automatically create the animation controller of that name in the current folder that I have open in project. So what I'm going to do here is create a new animation. It's going to ask me what to call it. I'm actually going to call this one, I'm going to say badge on, and I actually want to put in Fox 2023 because I may put more badges from future Feralities on this avatar in the future. So I'm going to call it Fox 2023 badge on animation. Hit enter to save it, and you'll notice now everything is lit up and I can start to interact with this guy. Now, if I go back to project and take a look here, oh, what's this? There's a new animation controller called Duran, the same as my root game object that animation is attached to. That's pretty important because animations attach to the object that they're animating. We're going to do something funky later to fix all this because animations can be moved around. But what's important is that while you're working with the animation, you want it on a controller that Unity understands how to use. So we're going to leave this animation controller here right now so that we can continue to work with this animation properly. So now that we've created this animation, we're ready to actually record the state that we're going to change. So I'm going to go to the inspector layer. I'm going to click on the record button. You'll notice your avatar may jump at this point, and that's because we're now in animation mode, and so it's attempting to put your avatar in an animation ready state that the original avatar creator may have created. So if it does jump, don't worry about it. Go ahead and just like pan down or up or to the side, wherever your avatar jumps to, if you want to see what's going on, which you probably do. So this is my badge on animation. So what I'm going to do is go to my badge object, and all I'm going to do, remember I'm in record mode down here, I'm just going to turn that on. We can see it's visible now, and you can see that badge game object is active, was added to the animation panel with a state of on. That's all we need to do. So you can now turn off the record, and pretty much that animation is done now. So I can turn this badge back off. And if I come back to project, here's our animation. Now, this is super, super, super important. Come back to your animation after you've created it. Turn off loop time if it's just a toggle. The reason why, this is a massive, massive performance problem in VRChat right now. If you have loop time turned on for an instantaneous animation that doesn't actually take any time, what happens is the animation system will continue to queue that animation up infinitely, forever, okay? And it's queuing them faster than it can process them. So what happens is this just keeps building a chain of animations that it will never get to running. What that does is create performance issues for everybody else in the world with you, and cause slowdowns. So this is a major, major piece of why performance sucks in VRChat. This may be fixed in newer versions of Unity, but in 2019, it is a big issue. It will drag down people's memory. It will drag down people's CPUs. Absolutely be responsible when you create a new animation. Turn off loop time if it's a toggle. If it's something like a dance that your avatar is going to perform, it has a pretty significant time that it's going to be running. Even if it's only half a second, it's not going to queue up loops of animation faster than they can be performed. So yeah, it's not a problem if you're actually looping something with some time to it, but an instantaneous animation like this, please turn off loop time. Save everybody else's frame rates and CPU cycles and memory in VRChat. So this is your PSA for this tutorial. Turn off loop time for toggles. Anyway, if you wanted to preview that as well, you can drag your root object down here into the preview window, and you could hit play, and it would show that you've turned the thing on. But yeah, so what you can do is use this as the preview window down here as just a confirmation that the state is working and it's turning on that thing. You'll notice my actual avatar, I've already turned it off. So this is telling me it's working, basically. So that's pretty much all we have to do with the animation as far as creating the animation. Now we're going to go back into our animator. We have the correct one selected because if I clicked on the new one that was created, all there is a base layer. You can see the new animation that we've made is in there. I'm not going to mess with this because we're going to eventually delete this animation controller anyway. Instead, I'm going to go back to my correct animation controller, and I'm going to go to my badge state, and all I have to do is take that new animation, drag it in here, okay. Actually, I forgot to do something else first, but I'll show you how to fix this if you make the same mistake. You want an idle state that is basically going to be a default state that you're going to transition in and out of. So I'm going to create an empty state, and you can see that this from entry down into my animation is currently connected. I don't want that. So what I can do is right click on that new state, set it as the default state, and now our orange arrow has moved to it, which is what we actually want. Typically you'd create this this idle state first, and it will automatically get the orange arrow and then drag your animation in. I forgot to do that this time, which is a common mistake, so no big deal. Now we want to be able to go from that idle state to our badge on state, and then from our badge on state back to our idle state with conditions. So what I'm going to do is right click on the idle state, make a transition. Now I get an arrow that I can place, and I just want to drop that onto our new animation, and then I'm going to do the same thing here. Click on the animation, then right click, make transition, go back to the idle state. And yes, that's going to let us go back and forth between these states. So next thing, let's set that up. What does that look like? Click on one of your transitions. This is the I'm going to rename this state to idle as well, because oh boy, can you only set the name when you create it? I think you can only set the name when you create it. Oh, maybe not. Hello, let me edit. Oh. Yeah, sometimes Unity is a pain in the ass to work with. I know there's a way to change the name because I've done it many times. It's just not coming to me right now. F2, F4. Oy. Alright, anyway, I can't remember how to change the name of a new state you create. But anyway, it doesn't have to be any name. I just thought I'd change the name to idle to make it more clear when we're working on the transition what we're going from and to. But anyway, click on your first transition from idle to the badge being on, then go to the inspector window. In here, this is basically our animation state control. And the first thing we want to do is put in our condition. And you'll see why in a sec, because we're going to expand some other things up above. So get conditions while it's near the top. We're going to add a condition. We're going to come down to our badge property, right? And we want it to go from the idle state to the badge being on when it's true. So this means you've gone into the radial menu and you've toggled it on. So we're going to run this transition when you toggle on the badge. That's set up how we want it. True was the default value, but also what we wanted. Next thing, open up settings. Turn exit time to 0. This is not a necessary step, but it can save you some sanity down the road when you're trying to debug your animations and what's going on. To just set this to 0, then turn off has exit time, which is going to blank that field out. What that has exit time is doing is saying we don't want to wait. We don't want to wait before making this transition. Get to it right away. Fixed duration is how long this transition should take. In our case, we want it to be instantaneous, so I'm going to hit 0. This is useful if you're doing things like animating a blend shape, animating an emission level up and down. That might be useful to have a transition duration. But in this case, we're trying to do instant toggles. So no exit time, no duration. The other values you don't need to worry about. that's it for this transition state. Should be ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to my animator, click on the other state. This is transitioning from the badge being on to off. And then I'm going to go to inspector. You can see we have our new, this is a different state, and we're going from badge on to new state, which is idle in this case. I'm going to create a condition again, and that's going to be that the badge is set to false. So this is the user has gone into the radio menu and toggled the badge off. That's going to trigger this state happening. Once again, we're going to set exit time to 0, turn off has exit time, and then we're going to set the transition duration again to 0. That makes this instantaneous and keeps it efficient. Basically, Unity knows to run this. Just do it now. Don't set up timers. Don't do a bunch of fiddly things that are going to slow everybody down. Just do it. Just get it done. So that's it. That transition is set up. At any time you can click on any of these guys and come in and take a look at them. One thing I usually do after I set up my transitions is just look at the inspector for the state animation and make sure that everything makes sense here. And it does. There's nothing tricky or complex about what we're doing here. So, and then I might just look at this guy too and make sure that there's nothing hinky here. So, oh, this is how you change the name. So here, I'm going to go into idle. And so now it's very clear when we're going from idle to badge on to idle. And now if I look at this inspector, the transition name here, idle to badge on, just makes sense from a plain English logical perspective. So there we go. We've got our transitions, and basically how this will work is when you toggle on, this transition activates, turns on the badge animation, and then when you toggle it off, this transition activates and takes us back to idle. Now, if you have certain plugins and tools installed in your project, which I do, you can actually see these transitions happen live when you're in play mode. I'm going to go ahead and Control S to save my project again, because you should be doing that as frequently as you can. Anytime you complete some little chunk of effort, go ahead and save your work. You'll notice that there's an any state here and there's an exit state. Those are a little more advanced, and they're used more for typical Unity animations than for VRChat. So, but some avatar setups that you'll find, people have hooked up the any state and the exit state and a whole bunch of other stuff in these state management controllers. So you might see some weird things, but this is the simple, quickest, dirtiest way to do things. So with that set up, I'm going to go ahead and do my bracelet now. And I'll do this a little bit faster without talking through it, since I already have talked through it a little bit. So again, I'm going to select my root. I'm going to go to the animation window. I'm going to create a new clip. I'm going to call this one Fox 2023 Bracelet On. Make sure I spelled that right. Save it. And okay. With that there, I'm going to go ahead and go into recording mode. And then I'm going to go down to my bracelet. Go to the inspector window. I'm going to turn that on. Bada boom, bada bing. I can see that this has been added with a point in my graph, my timeline, that it's turned on. That's what I want. So I'm going to stop recording. And then I'm going to come back to my project view, take a look at that animation, turn off loop time, and then I'm going to go into, remember, the animation controller that we're using. Go to my animator tab, pull, oh, oops, select bracelet first, pull my bracelet in here. Oh, wait, I want to set up my idle state first. So I'm going to create an empty. I'm going to go to inspector, set it to idle so that I understand what this is doing. Then I'm going to drop this in here. I'm going to make my transition to it. I'm going to make my transition from it. I'm going to take a look at that guy, make sure everything looks good. It looks good to me. This is just a simple toggle. And then I'm going to go into my first transition state. I'm going to set my condition to bracelet is true because I'm going from idle to on. I'm going to set my exit time to 0, turn off exit time, set my duration to 0, and then I should be good to go. And if I look in my preview window here, I can see that that's on. You can actually hit play. This is kind of pointless here. I think you will actually see it go off at some point during the playback and then come back on, or not. So it's sometimes useful when you're working with animations, sometimes not useful. But what's important is that that's on. I'm going to go back to my view here because I just realized it's still showing as on there. Turn that off, and then I'm going to come back to come back to this transition, inspector, and then we can see that it's still on in the previewer, which is a good thing. That means that the animation should be working. Yeah, all right, there we go. So that's that. I'm going to come back to Animator, my transition from on to idle. I'm going to come back over to Inspector. We're going to 0 out exit time, turn it off, 0 out duration time, and then it's warning me that it needs a condition. This is part of why I usually do a condition first, but at least it reminds you that, hey, this isn't going to trigger without a condition, so you might forget to do that, and it lets you know. So in this case, we want it for false. When the user is toggled off the bracelet, that's what's going to trigger this bracelet onto idle. Bada boom, Bob's your uncle. Go back to the animator. This all looks good to me now. So I'm going to dive into the hair now. This is very much a different beast. Because there's going to be multiple states, I'm actually going to be hooking this up to the any state instead of the entry. Now, before I can start setting this up, I need all my animations. So I'm going to go start working on creating those real quick here. And I'm just going to, again, be jumping through the creation of these animations because it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to select my root avatar. I'm going to create a new clip. This first one is called, let me see, if I move this window I can look at my my hierarchy, and I can see that the one I like is called bangs, so I'm going to call it bangs on. Bada boom, we're now in that. I'm going to hit record. I'm going to click bangs, go to my inspector window, I'm going to toggle that on, stop recording right away, and then toggle that back off. And now come back to my project. I can go ahead and add that right now, but I'm not going to at the moment. I do need an animation transition for hair off, so I'm going to go ahead and click on my root, go to animation. Actually, you know, I'm going to show you a different way to do this. Let me go to project. Another way you can create an animation real fast is by duplicating an existing one. But before I do that, actually, I just realized on my bangs on, I'm going to delete it and I'm going to start over, and I'll show you why in a second. when you're creating a multi-state transition for animations, you actually kind of want to make sure that everything is turned off all at once. So what I'm going to do is come back to here, go to my animation tab, and I'm going to create a new clip. And again, I'm going to call it bangs on. Bada boom, I've got my bangs on, and now I'm going to hit record. What I'm going to do different this time is toggle on and off all of the other hairs as well in order to force them to be off while I'm in this state. So first I'm going to turn on my bangs final because this is the one I want on. Then I'm going to go to every other one and turn it on, then off. And as you see when I'm doing this, it's adding the values down here to the animation so that they're there to edit. But more importantly, it's setting their states to off so that I know when I go to bangs are on, but all of the other hair is forced off. That's just an extra safety measure to make sure that the other hairs are turned off when you turn this hair on. Otherwise, you're going to have weird overlaps that doesn't look good. You can get into bad states, etc. So this prevents that, and now I can stop recording. And here's the fun thing I can do now. I can take bangs on, I can Control D to duplicate, and then I can change the name to, let's see, one is called fade, so fade on. And then I can go into this animation in the animation panel here, and I can turn bangs to 0 and turn fade on right here in this menu without having to go through a recording step and creating a new animation, etc., etc., etc. So that's it. I've created that animation just that fast. I'm going to take bangs on. I'm going to duplicate it again. I'm going to rename it to Mohawk on. All right. And then same thing. I'm going to go into the animation view. I'm going to set bangs to 0, and I'm going to set Mohawk to on. Hit enter to make sure that's saved. Come back to project, and I'm just going to repeat this again. This time for anime. And you'll notice that I'm using kind of not the best naming. I should be saying hair anime on to better sort these next to each other and make it more clear what they're for. But I am kind of speeding through this, and I'm not doing this project for a company, so I don't care as much. I'm just doing this for personal. So, but if you were working in a game studio, they would want you to provide much more concise and descriptive names. So I'm going to come back to project, and I've got one more to do. You could copy from anything. I'm just copying from bangs because it's the first one I made, and it's got a short name. And this last one I'm going to call parted on. And back to the animation panel, I'm going to go to 0, and then I'm going to go to this Gintronic hair that I bought and turn that on. Bada boom, back to project. I'm going to save my work because you should save often. You're going to hear me say that a lot. Just make sure there was nothing from work there. And alright, I should have my hair states except for one. This is the other reason, another useful reason that having set up my animations this way gives me the ability to come in here and do a hair off, and then back to my animation panel, everything to 0. So this is going to turn off all of the hair. If you can't read the full property name, you can always just drag this out and make sure that these are all is actives on those game objects. Alright, so that should be it. I've got all 6 of my hair state animations created. So I'm going to come over to not this animator. Now, you might wonder why, well, I didn't switch to this animator. Well, you created new animations that connected to this animator. Therefore, Unity automatically switched you over to that animation controller. So I'm going to go back to the animation controller I really want to be working with. Come down to hair. And what I'm going to do is pull all of these hairs in the order that I want them numbered, so it's easier for me to keep track of. I know hair off is going to be 0, so I'm going to put it up here. I'm going to create an empty idle state and make it the default state. This is just going to do some things. It's going to keep the animation controller working properly, so to speak, but we're going outside of that system, and we're going to use our own off of any state. I don't know what the performance impact of this might be, but this is a really common shortcut to just set this stuff up. So, all right, hair off. I know I want my bangs to be number 1. Let's see, where is that? Oh, you know what? Okay, I didn't duplicate before I did hair off. So I'm going to go ahead and do hair off is bangs on, and then I'm going to have to go into my animation panel and turn bangs on again. So I accidentally renamed my bangs on rather than duplicating and then renaming the duplicate. So that's what happened there. And all right, so I'm going to take my bangs on. That's going to be integer value 1. To see what my other integer values were, I'm going to have to open the hair menu in Inspector again and see what these were. So the order should be bangs, mohawk, fade, anime, and parted. So mohawk, fade, anime, parted. That's the order I'm going to pull these in. I already forgot. So fade, anime, mohawk, fade, anime, parted. That's my order. Mohawk, fade, anime, parted. So get this in here, mohawk, and then my fade. Okay. My anime, and then my parted. Alright, so any state is kind of magical. It means that you can make this transition regardless of what the current setting is. Okay, so that's why we're using the any state is this way I don't have to create a whole bunch of back and forth transitions to go from hair off to mohawk and then to anime. What this does is say, regardless of where you're coming from, let me go to. So this is kind of a shortcut. I've heard that it's a cheat. I haven't heard why it's a cheat, but I'm going to go ahead and make a transition from any state to every one. And again, you're going to click on any state and then right-click, make transition to each of these states. So they're all going to look very similar. Their condition is just going to be based on the hair integer value changing. So I'm just going to start at the first one with hair off, which I know is going to be 0. I'm going to go to the inspector. I'm going to first set my condition. The value is going to be hair. That's the property that we're associating to. And I'm going to say equals 0. 0 is already populated in there as the default. Has exit time is already turned off. The reason for that is because we're coming from any state, and so it assumes that there isn't going to be an exit time from a previous animation that needs to be ended or whatever. But same thing, I just want to 0 out. You can't change this value without has exit time being checked. So now that it's 0, I'm going to turn it off. Transition duration is going to be 0 because, again, we want an instant toggle. So bada boom. There we go. And I think you could even turn off oh sorry, fixed duration is if you wanted to use a percentage of an animation duration, right? So yeah, don't need to turn that off. All of this is fine. Can transition to self is fine. Preview source state. Okay, so that's basically so that you can do the preview to see what you're transitioning to and from. Anyway, that's it. That's all there is to it. We're going from any state to hair off when hair equals 0. Boom. That's that transition. Bangs on. Back to inspector. Same thing. I'm going to turn this on just to 0 it and then turn it off. 0 that. The condition is going to be hair equals 1, which is our default. So this will be on by default. And if I hit preview, there it is. There's the hair. You can see what should be on by default. So ta-da! And in this one, we're coming from hair off to bangs on, and so that's why we actually see that transition taking place in this animation, whereas we didn't with our previous animation control states that we set up. So boom, that's that state, good to go. We're going to do our next one, same thing, 0 out, turn off, 0 out, add a condition for hair where it equals the number 2, bada boom. This is any state to mohawk. Again, if we preview that, you can see the mohawk getting turned on. So good deal. We're going to go to our next one. That 0 off, 0 condition hair equals 3 for the fade. And again, if we preview, bada boom, there it is. Haha, Bob's your uncle. All right, and then our next one is going to be the number 4. Off, 0, condition, hair equals 4. Boom. And we can preview that and see that really ugly hair that I'm just leaving on for why not. I mean, I took the time to get it colored or textured correctly, put it in the right place, even though it looks terrible. Why not just make it an option we can go to? Why limit yourself? Back to inspector on the last one. I already forgot what number I'm at, so at 4, this next one's going to be 5. Inspector, I'm going to go ahead and put my condition in first so I remember it's 5 equals 5. Conditions in there. I'm going to 0 this out, turn that off, 0 out, bada boom, should be done. Just a preview and sanity check. There it is. Okay. So that's set up the way I want it. Again, why the heck, blah, 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 as far as the toggles. Why'd you set this up this way? I'll show you in just a second. Before I get to that, I'm going to do a little cleanup, and that is to take this animation controller that all of these animations attach themselves to, and now that I'm done creating animations, I can nuke it. So I'm just going to select it, hit delete. It'll ask me to confirm. That's a good thing, because if you deleted the wrong controller, you'd really be unhappy having to set this all up again. So delete, confirm, and bada boom, that's gone. So now I'm using a tool called Lyuma Avatar's 3.0 Emulator. Now I should point out that the creator companion that comes with that comes with VRC. This is their new tool. Oh hey, that's a pretty cool effect. Gotta love that. Anyway, creator companion also has a gesture emulator, but it's not as powerful or robust that I've been able to find as the Lyuma one. So I'm using Lyuma as part of my project, and That's imported here in this Lyuma Avatar 3 emulator. So once you have that imported, you can click enable, which I've already done. Once you've enabled, you'll get this Avatars 3.0 emulator control in your scene. And now I can click my avatar root game object, hit play, and once it's playing, I can come to the inspector window and I can actually live preview the menus and what they're going to do. So this is our top level expression menu where we have emotes, body types, expressions, extras, and hair. I can go into hair, and this is what will appear on the radial, but even more importantly, it's telling me when I toggle this specific option, it's going to set that property hair equal to this value. You can see that by default, it's actually set it to 1. That's because that's what we set in our properties file. So, or sorry, in the properties object. So, yeah, so that worked great. It set the default to 1 when I hit play, which basically composed a new avatar state. That's exactly what I want. Now I can actually test all of these by going to none. My hair's gone. By going to mohawk, I get my mohawk. By going to fade, I get my fade. Anime, I get my anime hair. Parted, I get my texture that I paid way too much money for. And then back to none, and then back to bangs. So, and then all of these transitions between each other appear to be working great. Now, what happens if I toggle off what's currently turned on? Yeah, oh, it reverted to 0. Oh, so there's a gotcha. All right, it's going to revert to 0. So you really should have your default set to 0. And I can fix that. That's actually pretty straightforward to fix. So what I'm going to do now is reverse none and bangs, okay, in my animation controller. I'm going to make bangs the 0 value, and I'm going to make none the 1 value. So to do that, I'm going to come out of play mode, because any changes you make while you're in play mode will get deleted when you come out of play mode. So keep that in mind. Turn off play before you edit. Always, always, always. Turn off play before you edit. I'm going to come back in here to my menus and animations. I'm going to select my animation controller. I'm going to look at my hair. And what I'm going to do is change these guys to around a 0 for the condition. Come back here for the none. I'm going to go ahead and set this to 1. All right. So that's the first change that I needed to make, was to make the transitions trigger the different animations on different values. So I've swapped those two values around. The next thing I need to do is go into my expression parameters and go to inspect, and I'm going to set hair to default to 0 now instead of 1. And then I'm just going to make sure that also in the parameters, animator parameters, that's also set to 0. Cool. And in fact, I may have just been able to change the 0 to a 1, and that may have fixed the problem entirely. But I like this solution a little bit better. It's a little more solid state. So I'm going to save my project again. I'm going to go back into play. You can see that it defaulted to the hair that I want. And if I come into the hair menu, oh, aha. So none is still hair 0 and bangs is hair 1. So I missed a value somewhere in here, and that is in the menu. So I'm going to have to go back and do that. I'm going to come out of play mode. I'm going to come into my hair menu, and I have to change this value. None is going to set 1, and bangs is going to set 0. So that needed to be switched as well. So there's 3 things you have to switch. I'm going to save my work again and hit play. Always save your work before you hit play. If Unity is going to crash, it's often going to crash when you go into play mode. So save your work before you hit play. Now I believe Unity might do a delta save state when you hit play anyway, so you might be okay, but recovering from a delta may not be fun. So now when I come in here and look, I see that bangs is my default selection. It's going to set hair to 0 when I toggle it. And when I go to none, it's going to set hair to 1. Now the cool thing about this now is if I accidentally misclick or I'm forgetful and I toggle off the none, it's going to revert back to my bangs for me. So, and that's the same for anything. If I'm on fade and I toggle it off, it goes back to bangs. Parted and toggle it off, it goes back to bangs. So this way, no matter what you do in this menu wheel, you're going to revert to your default state. In other words, you can't get into any weird or Bjork state. I can toggle on and off from one thing, and it toggles between my default and that thing. So just a convenient way to set up your stuff. And that's basically it. We've now gone and we've set up our toggles, and the only other thing I'd have, oh, well, while I'm in play mode, because I haven't actually tested the badge and stuff, so I'm going to go back, I'm going to go to my extras menu and toggle that chest badge. There it is, that toggle's working great. And then toggle that bracelet, that toggle's working great. I can have them both on at the same time. Have them both off at the same time in any state I like. So, and then I can turn on my rainbow and pano decals. And yeah, if you've never seen a pano decal, it makes people's eyes bleed and their brain hurt. It's a ton of fun. I strongly recommend doing pano decals. They're great icebreakers. Walking through a room where you make people's eyes hurt is a great way to get people to come up and talk to you and break the ice. So anyway, yeah, so I think that's it. The way the play mode Avatar Emulator works is it's not going to work in VRC if it doesn't work here. So if you've tested and these toggles work correctly in Unity with the Avatar Emulator, then they're going to work in VRC. You can be 99% certain of that fact. So because these are working, I feel pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and end my tutorial here, and I'm going to upload this avatar to VRC and jump in VRC for the evening. So thanks all for tuning in, and I'm going to go ahead and post this up on YouTube here shortly as well, along with links to some of the tools that I use here in setting up my avatars so that you have access to them as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you around.